Warning, this game is rated M for mature. Dozens, nay hundreds of people get bisected with a sword. Now, I can't cut that out of this video without losing or censoring most of the footage, so since I'm lazy, viewers beware. Ghostrunner is a first-person action platformer developed by Polish developer One More Level. Set in an enormous enclosed skyscraper called Dharma City, you play as the game's namesake, an unnamed, amnesiac, cybernetically enhanced assassin known as a Ghostrunner, whose personality is essentially the "all I know is I'm his kill" meme in human form. Your mission? Armed with only a sword, ascend to the top of the city to wrest control from the evil Keymaster who's taken over the city and threatens to destroy what's left of human civilization. With the bulk of the Keymaster's army standing in your way, it will take lightning-fast reflexes, some special cybernetic upgrades you unlock along the way, and the aid of a few characters who may or may not have the best interests of the city at heart. Oh, and you'll also die. A lot. Like, for real, just so many times. But when you get into a rhythm, and the game's mostly excellent movement controls are working in your favor, you'll feel just like the unstoppable cyber ninja the game makes you out to be. Thanks to the intro cutscene, we have a bit more of an idea about what's going on than our erstwhile protagonist when he wakes up at the start of the first level. But other than the fact that there's an evil Mrs. Dr. Octopus who seems to be responsible for our character being where they are when the game starts, the cinematic seems to be mostly a preview of some of the abilities that you will obtain over the course of the game. There are really only 4 characters of note in Ghostrunner. There's the player character, the Ghostrunner, who is nameless but eventually gets dubbed Jack, likely because of its generic everyman protagonist qualities, and because he occasionally has to jack into computers. You can really see the creativity on display here. Then there's the Architect, the AI who forces its way into Jack's mind and does most of the talking. Zoe is the last remaining member of the decimated resistance movement known as the Climbers, and the Keymaster is the Otto Octavius cosplayer who kicked off the events of the game by orchestrating a coup against the city's former leadership. As I mentioned, the Architect does most of the talking and exposition dumps in the game, which makes sense seeing as how he's set up shop inside your head, with Zoe being a slightly distant second. It's pretty clear that they wanted your character to be a cybernetic organism of few words, so while he does pipe up occasionally, it's mostly other characters whittering away in your ear as you die to that one sniper for the 10th time. Oh my god! The plot of Ghostrunner feels like a well-told version of a story that you've probably heard a few different times if you have any familiarity with the cyberpunk style or science fiction dystopias in general. Will Zoe be idealistic and care about the people of the city? Will the Keymaster have some nefarious plan to force humans to the next stage of evolution? Will the benevolent AI that forced its way into your brain won't stop talking about letting civilians die for the greater good and is worried that you're exhibiting actual emotion possibly have some ulterior motivations? Well gosh, I really couldn't say. Genre cliches aside, the story here is told with a pretty generous amount of panache, and the primary characters are distinct and very well acted. This left me feeling like I had a decent enough motivation for all those 50% off coupons I was handing out to every single goon I met on my climb up the tower. Ghostrunner feels great to play, mostly. Running and jumping, grappling, sliding, and decoupling, aka cutting people in half, all do a great job of letting you feel the power fantasy of being a cyber ninja. 98% of the time, the controls respond exactly how you would want them to. This means when you mess up and get shot, which will happen just so many freaking times, it will almost always be your fault. Checkpoints are also usually liberal and well-spaced, and when you die, getting back to the last one happens instantly with the press of a button, which is appreciated because, again, you will be seeing the death screen a lot. Your primary weapon is your sword, which will kill any non-boss enemy in the game with one hit. Your main defensive option is a dash that will slow down time when used in the air to let you maneuver around incoming projectiles. You can also deflect certain projectiles back towards your enemies, although missing the timing on that is probably one of my top 3 causes of death during my playthroughs. The game will strategically give you some power-ups to play with on occasion, such as a much more extended version of your bullet time, a super jump, or that Cyber Ninja classic, the electrified shuriken. The special abilities that you gain over the course of the story are all unique and effective in their own ways. For example, Blink is your classic ninja vanish and then the enemies fall over move, where you slow time, select up to 3 enemies, and swoop through them with your sword all at once. Or you could use Tempest, a blast that you release from your hand, which shreds everything in a cone in front of you. You also gain access to upgrades for your special abilities as you progress. These are applied by placing them on a Tetris-style grid. Although I never felt like the majority of upgrades were truly essential, outside of the one that I used for hunting down collectibles, they do help you lean into whatever abilities suit your playstyle. Plus, using less upgrades on the grid means the energy meter that governs the use of your special abilities recharges faster, so you're not pressured to min-max, which I appreciated. Having your abilities tied to the same energy meter means you can never use more than one at a time, which is a real bummer because I felt that unless I was in a situation where it was obvious the developers were trying to get me to use a specific power, I mostly ended up sticking with my favorite and didn't feel like I had much room to experiment. Let me elaborate on what I meant earlier on when I said the game mostly felt great to play. In a game where the high number of deaths means a good amount of repetition, the fact that the movement controls feel like they work 98% of the time means that the other 2% where things feel off are going to be much more obvious. There are some moments where you'll mantle on something you didn't mean to, or don't hit that wall you jumped to in quite the way you were expecting, and it breaks your flow. Probably even gets you killed. It also seems like enemies and certain moving parts of the environment don't reset to their last position when you reload after dying. When you're trying to build a rhythm of using your deaths to get closer and closer to the perfect run, feeling like the ground is occasionally shifting under your feet can go a long way towards throwing you off and extending the amount of deaths you'll suffer. This issue was never completely game-breaking for me, but after some of these moments, I did need to take a break and let the adrenaline and frustration wear off. The world of Dharma City looks fantastic as far as cyberpunk-flavored dystopian nightmarescapes go. Levels are sprawling, and the art design goes a long way towards selling and differentiating the various districts you move through. This is very welcome, as it would have been easy to leave levels feeling cramped and disjointed and cookie-cutter. There are some nice details tucked away in the corners too, voices heard behind closed doors, and some good references in the graffiti that help fill in the corners of the world in a game where most of the usable spaces are all traversal or combat-focused. Adding to this background detail, even though most levels tend to be linear paths from area to area, there are collectibles scattered throughout that, when viewed in your inventory, help to flesh out aspects of the story and world, including some audio logs that give further background on some of the characters in the time before the story begins. The music also fits this game quite well. The score, by Daniel Deluxe, has a thumping, synthetic drive to it that helps propel you through the game. Like the story, it feels familiar to the genre but manages to distinguish itself nonetheless. Finally, Ghostrunner sometimes dips into a more surreal tone whenever your character enters the Cyber Void, which is a digital realm where you earn most of your upgrades. While the trippy qualities of this place are a good way to break up the city sections, the majority of your time there is spent on tutorials, which leaves the Cyber Void feeling like a bit of a missed opportunity. Ghostrunner does a great job with its enemy variety, and introduces new threats consistently as you cut your way up through the city. You start by facing off against basic thugs called keys, with slow-firing yet still very accurate pistols, and by the end are fighting enemy ninjas, robots sending out waves of death, and well-dug-in snipers, to name a few. Each new enemy type that you face forces you to change up your approach. The basic goons are simple enough to let you run right at them while dodging their shots, but a trigger fires far too quickly for the direct approach to work. You've gotten used to sliding under the wave of energy a mech sends at you, but now there's a shield generator protecting every enemy in the room. The developers have done a good job of using these enemy variants in creative ways to keep you on your toes and keep the challenge escalating as you grow in your skills. The boss fights that the game presents to you must have been an interesting challenge for the developers, seeing as they set up a system where you and everything else in the game goes down in just one hit. The first boss, which is a massive defense system, seems to be the best distillation of the mechanics you have at your disposal. This enormous structure requires you to utilize the movement skills you've been slowly developing to dodge a truly baffling amount of lasers. While playing red light, green light with death, you work your way to the top several times to get in a few very satisfying sword strokes. The rest of the bosses in the game also lean into the idea that what's truly being tested is your reflexes and timing, as opposed to your combat abilities. My first quibble with the game comes in the opening cutscene. It's very slick and does a good job in retrospect of giving you a glimpse of what your Ghostrunner's capable of when he's unlocked his full potential, but the sound design of it seems a bit off. The effects are a bit too emphasized compared to the music, and leaves the end product feeling strangely hollow. I also think that even though it could be argued that it's thematically appropriate that the enemy ninjas who attack you with katanas all have Japanese accents, the fact that none of the other enemies or characters in the game speak that way, well, it sounded a bit forced. Is there some hidden clan of Yakuza that the Keymaster is recruiting from? Finally, it doesn't really feel like a nitpick, but I did very much want to point out that running on certain surfaces sounds awfully similar to what you hear when you smack metal with your crowbar in the original Half-Life. Considering some of the other shoutouts that show up in the game, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a deliberate choice. One of the things that I was most interested about Ghostrunner in the lead-up to its launch was its potential as a speedrunning game. With the popularity of speedrunning exploding over the last decade, it made sense that a game that focused on reflexes, precision, and traversal would hold a special interest to that community. While playing the game after its release confirmed much of the game's potential to me, the base version had some design choices that I felt held it back from being truly runner-friendly. While the instant recovery from death is a great point in the game's favor, there are also several unskippable cutscenes and mandatory tutorial sections that would almost certainly be grating to someone who is running levels over and over, hundreds or even thousands of times trying to shave off milliseconds for their time totals. This is why the December release of Hardcore mode made for a pleasant surprise. First of all, I'm always in favor of free downloadable content, and for another, the mode solved some of my problems with Ghostrunner as a speedrunning game. Hardcore mode got rid of the forced tutorials and cutscenes, which streamlined the game and let you stay focused on the actual gameplay. However, Hardcore mode also threw many more enemies into the mix, and moved the difficulty from what I had thought in the base game to be usually tough but fair, to outright cruel at times. That's not necessarily a critique, as hardcore should be hardcore, but it is a bit of a shame that the quality of life improvements that the mode brought for keeping things moving are so far restricted to just this mode. My first full playthrough of the original Flavor campaign took me about 7 hours to get through, and as of this writing, the current world record for the inbound category of the game is less than 40 minutes. I look forward to checking again in several months to see how much further down the record has gone. Ghostrunner does so much right that it's reasonably easy to overlook the few places where it stumbles. The controls and movement feel great when they're working, and the well-written dialogue helps elevate the somewhat cliched story. I also very much appreciated how the difficulty curve really lets you feel how much your skills are improving while still keeping the challenge level high. If you're looking for a game to push your reflexes and platforming skills to the edge, this is definitely one to check out. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any thoughts about Ghostrunner or the video, or thoughts or comments in general, please feel free to leave them down below in the comments section. And also consider leaving a like or subscribe. Lets me know that you like what you see and that you want to see more. Alright, well, see you next time.